What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick Faribault. I work for Pittsburgh Sports Now, call games at WPTS Radio, and I'm a production assistant at ACC Network. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the Pitt offensive line. They return all starting five guys, but could there be a shakeup on the offensive line that we could not see coming? We will talk about that, and we will also talk about the true potential of this offensive line, how it fits in with running the football and also protecting Keaton Slovis. It's all coming up today on this episode of the Locked On Pitt podcast.
Are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast, everybody. As always, thank you for making the Locked On Pitt podcast your first listen every day, folks. We always appreciate that. That is always great. If you're making sure to watch this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, do all those great things. If you're listening to this, make sure to leave a review, do that as well. And folks, today I want to talk a little about the Pitt offensive line because it's one of the most fascinating position groups on this entire team. In my opinion, this is a group that is very fun to look at. It's a group that when you look at it has a ton of experience, maybe the most experienced group on the team, to be quite honest with you. And this should be a group that really works well together. However, here's something that I also look at and I say, okay, there is something a little bit awry here, and that is that I think Pitt is almost so deep in terms of their offensive linemen that there's a possibility we don't see the starting five that all came back start next year. Certainly possible that this happens, right? It's certainly possible you see Drexel, Kradel, Minor, Warren, Houy. It certainly is possible that happens. In the same place, everything. But here's the thing. And I want to go through the starting guys one by one because I think this makes sense. But here's the thing. There are so many talented guys on this offensive line. We have seen some of them play. We have seen some of them grow. We've heard about some of them grow. That it's going to be somewhat interesting to see if all five of these guys hold on to their spots. And here's where I'm going to start. And I think it's interesting to start on the left side because I think this, in my opinion, is at least the most concrete of the players. I think Carter Warren is the most concrete player on the entire line. A true blue, great left tackle that is going to be a starter in the NFL. He's probably going to be a day 2 pick come next year. A top 100 pick, has great traits, athletic, mean, very smart, very intuitive, has improved so much. He still has some issues about getting beat around the gate. We understand that. The hands can get a little bit inconsistent at times. Sometimes he plays with his pads a little too high. It's okay, though. At the college level, Carter Warren is a fantastic left tackle who will be able to protect Keaton Slovis' blind side. Now, when you look at Marcus Minor, another guy who I think is fairly entrenched in there, probably the second most secure guy on this line, at least in terms of where he will play. And I want to say that where they will play, because Jake Kradel is going to start. We know this, but he might not start where he actually played last year. So that's something to keep an eye on. But Marcus Minor is going to start. And so Marcus Minor is one of those dudes that is just easy steady. You're not going to talk about him a lot. You're not going to say, yeah, that guy is he is something. He is flashy. He is just destroying guys. And that's really never what he has been, right? That has never been the MO of what Marcus Minor has done. He's always been a guy that has good hand placement, good anchor. He's a guy that plays with solid pad level. He's not a terrific athlete, not a terrible athlete, but he's a little stiff in his lower body, a little stiff in his hips. But a guy that isn't going to move bodies a ton, but will be such a roadblock, such an obstacle, a guy that has just all the necessary skills, core strength, all of this as a guard to be a really good college guard. And he's just such a steady force. You just don't really see him get beat very often. Very smart, so doesn't get beat by many stunts, doesn't get confused by any of these stunts. It's a very important thing to look at overall. And so when you look at what happens in terms of this all, Marcus Minor and Carter Warren should be starters. Period. They should be starters. I think where we start to get into a little bit of a discussion here is the center position. Owen Drexel notably had some snapping issues last year, and this is the most interesting part of it all to me. He did not, and this is the most basic thing of the center position. And I think you take it for granted a little bit. You talk about the hands, that offhand, the ability to work up to the second level, the mobility in the open field, the strength, the core strength. You talk about all this, the footwork. We talk about all of this specific type of technical stuff, and we start talking about the minutia of the position, and then we forget, they actually have to snap the ball accurately. And I think this is one of the issues that plagued Owen Drexel this past year. And I think he was a solid enough center when he was playing there. And so I'll say this. I think he's got decent hands. The offhand is good. I think I don't think he has great strength. I don't think he has a great angle. I think he can be overpowered sometimes by that. I think he gets a little high in his pads and opens up his chest a little bit too much so he can get pushed back a little bit, but we don't see it a ton. And again, a pretty smart dude that communicates the calls really well, manned that hole really well, but the snapping issues were all there. And Owen Drexel is also not a fantastic athlete. He's a fine athlete, but he's not going to, drop your jaw in terms of his athleticism. And so here's the thing. When you look at someone like Owen Drexel, who's a really good leader, has a lot of these good intangible traits, but has the snapping issue, he is not. And I really want to be blunt here because I think it kind of brings home the point. I don't think Owen Drexel, with those snapping issues, is 100% a good enough player to stave off other prospective guys. Specifically, I think this is where Jake Kradel could come in at center. We knew he had center capability. He broke his fibula at right guard. Last year was a phenomenal right guard. Real mover, very good athlete. Guy that can move well. Strong as an ox. I mean, one of the strongest players on this football team, period. A guy that just understands angles. A guy that has the core strength necessary. Now, there are issues, and I think the hand usage can get a little bit his hands can get a little wide, and I think that can be an issue for him at times. I think at times he can get a little over aggressive and almost lunge forward and flat back himself. But I think he's a good player, and I think those hands are really quick. The hand speed's quick. He's got good punches. He's got strong punches. The punch timing's there. It's all in sync. You have independent hands. It's all showcased really well there. And so when you look at a guy like, say, a Jake Kradel, I think you have interior flexibility with him. And I think at center, this is where he could come in. And then I think you get to Gabe Houy, who is an interesting player. I think he's a good player. I don't think, I didn't say interesting in a bad way. He's a good player. Not a phenomenal athlete, but a really good, powerful player. A guy that can move well, marginal athlete, but that's okay. He's powerful. He's strong. He's got great core strength. Deals with power rushers really well. Doesn't have great length, with that, which I think at the tackle position can get him a little bit. And with that athleticism, he doesn't have that length to overcompensate for it. So it makes me think he's the guard. And so I think you can look at him sometimes get beat a little bit too much there. And that's the thing. I think when you look at Gabe Houy, I think he's going to actually fit in at right guard really well if that's where he ends up moving. I think he's a natural guard. I think that's where he's going to play at the NFL. And I think he's a guy that, can swing inside out is what I say. He can be a guy that can play outside if need be, maybe not what you want, but he could do it if it's necessary. And I think in really this realm, I think he's just going to be a better guard. He's more stationary there. He's more stable. And he's a guy that has every skill set strength-wise and hand usage-wise, as well as pad level-wise, that makes sense for him to be there. And his length is going to be at least average to above average inside, while it might just be average to below average at tackle. And I think that's really important to look at. So I think he's a natural right guard. So I think your starting four could be from left to right, Warren at left tackle, Minor at left guard, Kradel at center, and then Houy at right guard. And we're just talking through kind of possibilities. Obviously, I will not discredit Owen Drexel. He has a really good summer, and he's the starting center. So let's be real about that. he is the starting center if that ends up happening. If he really fixes those snapping issues and he shows consistency, he will be the starting center. And then we're just talking about the same lineup from last year. But I think there can be a little bit of a shakeup here in this rotation. And that's what I want to really point out. Now, I want to talk about some of the guys that could fill in at that right tackle spot, other guys that could push some other guys, some of the younger guys for playing time. And then I want to talk about the fit within Frank Cignett's offense and with Keaton Slovis and why this is so important. But first, let me let you know about Built Bar because, folks, Built Bar is the first ever protein bar that is covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, this is covered in 100% real chocolate, and it's a protein bar, so it tastes like a candy bar, but you get all the health benefits of a usual protein bar. Low in calories, low in sugar, low in carbs, high in protein. You have so many flavors to choose from, including the Built Bar Puffs, which are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. Some other flavors include mint brownie, coconut almond, white chocolate cookies and cream, and more. Any flavor you want, you can take a crack at. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LACT15 and get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LACT15 for 15% off Built.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast as we continue to talk through this offensive line and the situation that Pitt is dealing with here in the trenches. Specifically, some young guys that could step up, or maybe even guys that are now, I guess, a little older that you would think of as young guys because they haven't played a lot. But a guy like Matt Goncalves is the first one that comes to mind, right? A guy like Matt Goncalves, who has started multiple games on both sides, by the way. So a guy that has been in the lineup, a guy that knows the expectations in the lineup, a guy that has really flashed a really high-level ability to do some things. Although the end of last year, there were troubling things. And so Goncalves has showcased the ability to be a pretty solid athlete. I think he's pretty quick. I think he's pretty nimble. But cannot deal with inside counters all that well. Kind of can overset a little bit with his footwork. Can get a little bit overzealous there. He's a guy that usually gets to his spot, but he's working through a bunch of different sets he's trying to use right now. And he's kind of trying to figure it out. He's kind of in this transitional phase, and maybe this is the year he puts all of it together because he's got good length. He's got really strong hands. When he gets his hands on you, you're probably done. He's got really good grip strength, which is really a great trait to have as an offensive lineman. If you have really good grip strength, you probably are shutting it down. And so that's one of the great traits I love about him. And in the run game, he can really move bodies. He's a strong player. I wish he was a little stronger. I wish he was a little stronger on lower body. And I think the core strength could use a little bit work too. I think that's two things where he could use a little bit of work, but I don't think it's a huge detriment to his game, at least not at this level. I think it's those inside counters that can get him a little bit. And I think when you look at him overall, just finding that consistency with his timing, his pass sets, getting everything in sync and kind of timing it up because it's a kinetic chain as an offensive lineman. You kind of got to feel it up overall, right? So now when you talk about him, he could start at right tackle. Gabe Houy could start at right tackle. I can't forget about two other guys, Branson Taylor and Ryan Baer. And I have to mention Ryan Baer because you look at him, and he was the definition of a people mover, an absolute machine in terms of moving bodies on his high school tape. Now, is that going to translate to the next level? We'll see. But what I do know is this dude is just an absolute machine in terms of his strength. He's one of the strongest natural true freshmen I've seen come through the program. He's got the strength in the upper body, the core strength in the lower body strength, but just move dudes. He's got the mentality to do it too. Now, he's green around the edges. He's got to use the hand usage a little bit better. He's got to understand how to get to his spots. We saw him in the spring game get beat by John Morgan because he couldn't get enough depth on his jump set to get to his spot. And so Morgan just beat him around the edge. And so you look at that, and I don't think he's a bad athlete. I think he's actually quite a good athlete, and I think he can move to the second level. I think he can move in space well. And so really, it's all about just consistency. He's a true freshman, so you're going to need time, especially as an offensive lineman. It's a very rare thing to have freshmen come in and start on the offensive line because it's such a delicate position. It's such a complicated position that a lot of the guys need a year. And so if you need a year, it's whatever. But he can compete there. He's got the natural talent to do it. I think if he catches on enough, he could potentially do there. Branson Taylor's a huge dude. Might be more of a guard, not for the length purposes though. But I think he's a little heavy-footed, maybe a little too heavy-footed at times, and so he might not be able to get enough depth on, say, a 45-degree set, where he's taking big deep drops, those wide nines. So look at those speed rushers, the speed rushers that can beat you around the edge, that have that explosiveness, can beat you. I think that's something to look for. Now we didn't see him in the spring game. We'll see there what his issue, what his issues is there, if those are fixed or whatever. I think he could fit in guard maybe a little bit better. Use his strength, use his size, use his hands better. Pad level needs to improve a little bit. This is a guy that, though, is very naturally talented and is really caught on amongst staff as a pretty big favorite. So I think he's a fun player to look for as well. And then you go to the interior and you really have three guys you have to highlight. Ryan Jacoby, the Ohio State transfer, is the first one. He is a guy that is described as just a real relentless worker, hard worker that comes in and is willing to do whatever you want him to do. The guy's just ready to be willing to do whatever he wants to do, put his body on the line, and be a guy that's a team-oriented guy. He's mean, and he's improved a lot. This has been the stuff in the building. He's improved a lot. Getting on the field as that sixth lineman, he's proved to this team that he is valuable. He's proved to them. He's improved on his hand uses a lot. His pad level has always been really good. He's gotten the weight room, gotten his stuff up. His core strength's improved a lot. Grip strength's a bit of an issue. That's going to be a big one to see if he can stay through it, finish blocks. I think that's going to be something to look at. But this is a guy that has a lot of talent to play both guard spots, has clearly the pedigree, obviously was at Ohio State. So this is a guy that has a lot of natural upside. And then you also look at Blake Zubovic, who has played center, played both guard spots. Kind of a fascinating player, not the same people mover as a Jake Kradel. Kind of the Marcus Minor role. Has to improve on his hands to get to that level, but really smart football player with good pad level and adequate strength. I think the hands are the biggest thing. Get those hands inside, make them independent of one another, get the grip strength down, and get them inside the pads. That's going to be the thing. He can get too wide sometimes, or he feels like he's going to get too wide and doesn't trust his hand usage, and he gets caught leaning forward a little bit. There can be a lot of kind of being heavy-footed almost on that and being on his heels a little bit too much, or sometimes on too much on the tip of his toes. He's just kind of got to be even-footed, fleet-footed, not let that footwork get to him and the hand usage get to his head. But he can be a really good player. I truly believe that. And then Terence Moore, the backup center, who we haven't even talked about yet, is fun. A very good athlete at the position. And probably the best athlete among these guys other than Jake Kradel. He's a phenomenal athlete that just kills angles in the run game. Guy that can reach the second level with ease, and he makes it look easy. And that's been the big thing about him. He's a guy that in a wide zone offense, which Frank Cignetti runs, boy, want to talk about a natural fit. This guy destroys angles for linebackers at the second level. He moves at a different speed than Pitt linemen do. You haven't seen a center this athletic come through the program in a long time, folks. I'm telling you with that. Now, because he's athletic, he's got shorter arms. He doesn't deal with power all the well, can get eaten up by bigger nose tackles, so that's something to look at. The power aspect of this is going to have to improve. He's going to have to improve that off hand. He's going to have to improve the placement of that hand. But when he gets to the second level in space, he's deadly. He can clear you out. He will clear you out. And so that's the thing. He's going to have to be a guy that just kind of technically improves in the trenches there on those inside runs, inside zones, stuff like that. He's going to have to really put it deep down. But when you get him in space, work him in wide zone, boy, he is a beautiful fit for that scheme. And Frank Cignetti loves himself some wide zone. So I love that fit. Not sure if he'll start this year, but next year I would place the betting odds on him starting at center. He's a really nice fit. And I love that for Terence Moore. Now, folks, let's talk about why this is important and the importance of this for Keaton Slovis and why I think it's just so huge. But first, let me let you know about Rock Auto, because with the ever number of increasing makes and models, it's now possible for your local chain auto parts store to store all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning while you can wait while a person behind the counter orders while on their computer. Folks, all you have to do, though, is go into your pocket and access rockauto.com. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain's parts store or car dealership? Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have anything your car or truck could ever need. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. We're continuing to talk through some things here about the offensive line. And we talked about what it could be. There are a number of different lines we could see in terms of this. But here's the more important thing. When you look at Keaton Slovis, one of the biggest things about him is that when he's under pressure, he can crack a little bit. And I don't mean that he's going to completely crack under pressure. He's not a guy that is 100% going to just let things fall apart in his head, but he can slide into pressure. He doesn't move in the pocket all that efficiently. He did in the spring game, which was pretty encouraging, but it's very rarely you see a QB manage the pocket and it's suddenly different from one season to the next. It just doesn't happen very often. Maybe he can be one of those rarities. It's happened before. It's just very rare. Don't ever make your expectation that a guy's suddenly going to learn how to feel the rush. But I think specifically having his backside protected with Carter Warren and Marcus Minor, I can't imagine the two better guys to be the backside protectors. These are going to be guys that are going to make him feel really cozy in there. He's going to feel very good, and he's going to be able to sit in there and really scan the field. And this is also something we talked about, right? When it comes to the time he's going to have. Not that Slovis can't move out of the pocket. They'll move the pocket a little bit for him. They'll do some stuff like that. But having a good O-line for him, and I mean, it goes for any quarterback, for a guy that, under pressure makes some bad decisions because he can't go from 1 to 2 when he gets off his first read even to the front side, that's going to be the biggest issue. And this is why it's the biggest issue, because under pressure, he's a guy that can really feel things a little bit too hastily. Almost feeling ghosts and kind of move into pressure. He's going to be a guy that at times is just not going to go through that 1-2 read, that smart read, and make a bad decision. He's prone to bad decisions under pressure more so than most quarterbacks. And that's why it's so important to me. It's so important to me that you get someone like a Carter Warren, a Marcus Minor on that backside, and why it is so impressive to have those two there, those two real stalwarts there, because it's a nice fit for Keaton Slovis to come in and do that. He'll be able to work through his progressions front side a lot more easily. We talked about the backside stuff. That's an issue. The backside progression stuff, that's something Slovis is going to have to fix. No matter what the protection is, that's going to be an issue. Now, it could be lessened by good protection, but still is an issue. You're rarely going to have enough time, even if Pitt's offensive line is really good. You're really going to have the time to go 1, 2, okay, I'm going to turn back, and I'm still going to scan, and then I'm going to throw it. Now, Kenny Pickett had some of that last year, and so he might have some, but he's not going to have it consistently. So you can't expect that to be the consistent expectation. And that's what I think I'm trying to get at here. But having this offensive line is huge. Any quarterback knows that the best friend, other than maybe a number one receiver, is a fantastic offensive line. You don't want your quarterback getting hit, and Slovis has been hurt a lot, and all this. It's going to be a good offensive line for him to work behind. And yes, the offensive line does need to improve a little bit. Yes, they have areas they can 100% improve in. And we talked about every one of them and what they could potentially do. And so when you look at what Slovis and this offensive line are doing together, they're going to mesh nicely. And the wide zone stuff's going to help because the wide zone is going to take pressure off these guys in the run game. That's not been their strength necessarily. Not that they couldn't do it. They did it last year to a degree, but it wasn't their 100% strength. And so you have to acknowledge that. So they have places to grow in terms of the run game area, in terms of run block. Wide zone, this team has good athletes on that O-line. Carter Warren's a good athlete. Jake Kradel's a good athlete. You throw I mean, you throw Houy in there at guard, and he has to reach backside at B. I mean, that he can do that. I mean, he's a guy that is going to be able to make those reach blocks. I mean, this team has the athletes to be good at reach blocks. This team has the athletes to run that wide zone scheme. Then they also have the mean guys on the front side, especially that left side, where they can just clear Hall. And I mean, that's true. And so this is going to help Keaton Slovis too, because you get an effective running game up that wide zone action. But what happens? Linebackers start getting sucked in. Okay, I play fake it. Oh, there's Jordan Addison wide open over the middle of the field, or there's Jared Wayne wide open over the middle of the field. Saw a little bit in the spring game. Nick Patty specifically had this happen to him a little bit. Slovis had it a few times, but I mean, his receivers didn't help him a ton, but there was the one play where Jared Barton was wide open and this happened. He threw a dime right to him and Barton just dropped it. So you look at what the Frank Cignetti offense is trying to do. It's a very NFL-esque offense, so we talk about that. But the offensive line is going to have some of the pressure eased off them in the running game as well. It's going to be about the running backs to make that one cut and use their explosiveness, because all these running backs are explosive in a lot of different ways, and that'll be their ability. That'll really showcase their ability to take some pressure off the offensive line. The offensive line just has to hold their blocks and doesn't necessarily have to be people movers. Now, if they're people movers, it's a good thing, but they don't necessarily have to be. So I think it's a nice fit for this offensive line, a good fit for Keaton Slovis, and I'm excited to see what this offensive line can do. Whoever the starters may be, there could be a shakeup on the offensive line, but whoever the starters may be, I'm excited to see what they do in the Frank Cignetti offense. All right, folks, as always, thanks for listening to the Locked On Pitt podcast. Check us out wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, hail to Pitt.